this story of the Gadarenes is preached not just on one Sunday a year, it's actually several Sundays. And it's in it's in all three of the Gospels. And in one Gospel there are two, and in the other there is just the one. And this is the one where we hear the demons' recognition of Jesus Christ. The man who was possessed of the demons did not recognize him. So when you hear the demons cry out and say, "Thou Jesus, thou Son of David, thou Son of God, have you come to torment us?" Because what they were worried about when they saw him was that they would be tormented from now until eternity. And they didn't want to do that, so they were asking him not to do it, so they sent them into the herd of swine. Now this is the Gadarenes, where it was not a place where, it was not a Jewish town, put it that way. It was a town where, in quotes, Roman citizens lived. And so they were, of course, not Jewish, but they were pagan. And so when they saw Jesus literally rebuke the demon, and they see him sitting at the feet, they don't know what's happening. They are really uptight. They're scared. They're frightened. And then, he commands them to go into the pigs, and the pigs run violently down the hill, and they're choked and they drown. And so it's one of those things where they were perplexed, and unlike the opposite happened with Fotini, who was the woman at the well, who basically, she was enamored by who Jesus was. She asked him questions, he asked her questions. It was a back and forth. But in this case, these men and women were not ready to deal with Jesus Christ. And so he sends back the man who was filled with demons. He sends him back to preach and to live and to do things that show that he is transformed by what has occurred. And so so that's kind of the message for all of us, is that we want to say that we would recognize Jesus and that we would not run from him if he came and told us. But it's like we don't. But in our daily life and our daily living, are we living in accordance with the commandments of Christ? Are we living according to what he says and he gives us to do? Do we follow him from the morning we wake up to the time, in the morning when we wake up to the point the day we put our head to our pillow? So many times we don't even think of him, maybe even perhaps throughout the whole day. Maybe sometimes we don't even think about Jesus Christ. We just think about our own life and our own troubles and our own trials and our own tribulations. And that can get you spinning around really fast, so that you're not paying any attention to what our purpose in this life is. Our purpose is to glorify God and to bring all people to the Orthodox faith. That's our goal. There's no other goal that we should have in our life. Whatever else we might do, be we herders of sheep and cattle, or be we computer nerds that make their life on the internet. It doesn't really matter what you do. If you're a dishwasher in a restaurant, it doesn't matter. That's just whatever your occupation is at this moment, keeping something over your head. But as far as our purpose is to preach the kingdom of heaven. So that's what, of course, he tells this demoniac to do. He says, go forth and preach the kingdom of heaven. Show what has happened in your life. Show how you've been transformed by what has occurred here. And that's what he did. And he went down and he published it amongst all the city and all the folk of the city. And so we don't really know much more about him, except that we do know that in that moment he was touched so deeply that he changed forever. And the Lord even tells the apostles later on, he says, this kind come forth but by prayer and fasting. So we talked last week, I think, about all the Lazaruses we meet on the street. all the people who are sick and suffering, are homeless without food and shelter, all those who are broken, let alone those who stand on the corners and rant and rave. And I was coming in yesterday, and there was a man in the corner back here. He looked, if you would have looked at him, he looked like a guy who was just getting ready to work out, until he started stomping around, going up in circles, screaming at the top of his lungs, and you knew that something was amiss with that person, something not quite right. And so as I was going by, I didn't have time to stop because I had to do the service, but I slowed down and I said a prayer for him, which didn't necessarily help, by the way. He was jumping down even more, up and down more after that. But I did say a prayer for him as I was preparing to do the liturgy, and did not want to forget him. Even today, did not want to forget him. God bless that man, shirtless, with just his sweatpants on and barefoot, on the concrete here, along here. Not an easy sight to do. But he was pretty mad, pretty upset, pretty irate. Pretty much probably had demons attacking him. And so we live in a world that they either attack through flattery or they attack through they attack in other ways as well. St. Nikolaj Velimirović talks about how the demons will just try to creep into your life. They'll stand on the side and they'll try to creep into your life in such a way as to get you to think that somehow to take over your thinking with their thinking. And you can see that when people fall on hard luck, bad things happen to them in their life, they become penniless, they become homeless, how the temptation would be for them. Maybe at first they were strong and they fought and they said, no, I can get a job, I can do this, I can do that. But maybe after a while they just got worn out. Their minds got worn out by this constant fight, and so then the demons take over. And then it gets very difficult to deal with them. But for instance, I have a relative that probably 30 years ago now, he was one of those guys. He was on the streets of Los Angeles proclaiming he was a Christian and, but swearing up a storm and drinking, just like I saw him take a fifth of scotch and just down half of it, right? Like from here to the back wall. And I was like shocked at how the state that he had fallen into. Well, we didn't hear from him for quite a long time, actually. And then one day we get a phone call from the hospital down in Long Beach, and they called Deborah up, my wife. They said, do you know a guy named so-and-so and such a relative? He said. And she said yes. And so we went down there immediately. We went down to see what had happened to him. And what had happened to him was that he was hit by a bunch of thugs in the head with a steel pipe, and he was knocked out and he was left for dead. They thought he was dead. But somebody called 911, they took him in, they got him resuscitated, and then he started having epileptic seizures because he was off the booze for a while. And that scared him, more than anything. Well, I would like to say from that day forward, he has been in recovery. So he's been sober for 30 years. And very stable life, very, very stable life. And loves Jesus, the whole thing. And so it is possible that through prayer and fasting and through almsgiving and through helping, we can change the lives of people who we might encounter on the street. People like this demoniac, because it's our duty is to serve the poor, the needy, and the suffering, to love our enemies, to love those that spitefully use us. That's our duty. That's what we're supposed to do in our daily life. So may God give each of us the strength and the courage to do what is right by God in serving our dear brothers and sisters who are so broken and fallen. And may God give us strength. Glory to Jesus Christ. Glory forever.